Welcome to Season 3 of the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. Last year, host Jorden Guth got a crash course in the fundamentals of hi-fi from enthusiasts, journalists, manufacturers, and music industry professionals alike. Those lessons will continue, but this year, Jorden will also get a history lesson from the legends who were there from the giddy-up and who made hi-fi what it is today. So with that out of the way, here's Jorden and this week's guest.
Hello and welcome to the SoundStage Audiophile Podcast. Today we have Ole Siig, founder and chief designer of Treble Clef Audio, joining us. Welcome, Ole.
Thank you.
So, over the last year or so, Treble Clef Audio has made a big splash. But before we kind of get into all of that stuff, let's kind of talk about your journey into hi-fi a little bit. So just kind of enlighten us a little bit here. How did you first kind of get into hi-fi audio or audio in general? Do you have like a first memory?
I have first memory. I think it's like with many I've heard on your podcast. Of course, I got interested when I was quite young. I had a dad who was an electromechanical engineer. He made industrial X-ray, photographing weldings on plane wings and oil pipelines and that kind of thing. So he brought me to the company, to the workshop over weekends, and we did hobby projects. And he made me a little crystal radio, which I found really boring because I was about 7 years old and it took far too long. And he played music as well. He was a pretty accomplished musician, but as a hobby. And before I was born, he made sort of his own version of the then classic design furniture. Probably because he liked it and he couldn't afford to buy it, but he could make it at the workshop. So I guess I was introduced into that. So I knew early on at school that I wanted to pursue electrical engineering and electronics. I made many attempts at amplifiers. Some of them ended up as oscillators rather than amplifiers, and the typical box loudspeakers. But when I did start my electrical engineering degree, I had a couple of mates who were also into hi-fi music. So we made all sorts of projects, but having the lab at the university and the Brühl and Kerr, lovely instruments, I sat down there to make various things. But one of the first things I still have actually is a preamplifier, obviously analog, linear to 2 megahertz. I was crazy about, phase linearity and frequency linearity even then. So I got that made. And then a bit later on, still more box speakers, but me and these mates of mine, we were quite keen still on the linearity and the phase linearity. So we actually managed to design a phase linear active analog filter. Which funnily again has also a tendency to become an oscillator if you have curves that are steeper than like 12 dB per octave. But I made what's called a Bode plot program on an Acorn Atom. So we could run that for about 24 hours or more, depending on how complex the circuit was, to see if it would actually do the right thing before we build it. So lots of things, and then a career and family and children and all those things, and not too much audio until I managed to escape my then corporate career and move back to Denmark and do some consulting and discover my hobby and my passion again.
So, and that's really interesting because like you have a degree in electrical engineering and computer science.
Yeah, that makes, and I was lucky actually. I think, I had a great start because I remember interviewing for what I thought would be sort of a part-time job. And at the time, it was to program a 6502 processor for some telex modems and things. But then I told them that I'd learned UCSD Pascal. And at our university, they used to teach Fortran, but I was the first year where, for whatever reason, they switched to UCSD Pascal. So I didn't get the job. They called me 3 months later and said, wait a minute, you said you could do UCSD Pascal. And they then just become the first importers of Apple computers in Denmark.
Oh.
And the Apple IIe computer was born with UCSD Pascal, and there was no one in Denmark who could program these things.
Oh, super interesting.
Yeah.
So you basically became a hot commodity overnight.
Yeah, so I was able to program these things and make application software on those while I was also studying. So that was pretty cool.
And I guess the curious bit here is you didn't go directly into the audio industry or any like, I'm going to say close adjacent industry. Mm-hmm. You went totally into software development and I'll call it big business, but it's not. I mean, the world works on computers, so it's every type of business. Was there always hi-fi in your life and kind of audio still in your life? It was just not the forefront. Is that fair to say?
Oh, definitely was until maybe late 20s. I mean, I got married when I was 31. And at that time, you know, you need to have a career and a house and all the rest of it. So there was no time for that. So it was more just 100% full on the business side. But in that small company I started in Denmark, we did shipping systems for shipping companies to book their voyages. So the brokers would book a container ship or a tanker or whatever was needed. And the system we built, or I built for that, had a database of holes and hatches and cranes and voyage estimation. And then this telex communication that was the thing in those days. So it was like a typewriter connected to a very slow telephone line. And the company had made a modem, an electronic modem that replaced the typewriter thing. And I made the application software to do all that. So we got that installed in that small company, I think in about 30 shipping brokers across the Nordics. And then we made, in those days, like foreign exchange in the banks were traded over telex. And the reason is just that it was accepted as a legally binding contract on the only media where you could have a live written conversation.
Oh, fascinating. So this would have been the 80s, early 90s
that
type.
Would be sort of early mid 80s. Yeah.
So the kind of career life was more towards the logistics and the finance side of things.
Yeah, the whole I'm thinking of it like understanding somebody else's business quite deeply and then turn it into a better way of doing it through application programs.
Gotcha.
And everything below it to connect to stuff and whatever. So we ended up making a system for trading foreign exchange that got installed in probably the only trading room in Copenhagen then for the Danske Bank.
Huh.
And then we were these two mates of mine where we did phase linear analog filters and so on. We decided to leave that company and set up our own and address the market for trading room systems in England and since the United States, becoming a NASDAQ listed and then a NYSE listed entity in the US, doing many different things for banks. So I spent a lot of time in the UK. I spent a fair amount of time traveling the world. And then I left that company and I joined Reuters, which became Thomson Reuters. And my career there sort of finished with me, well, first in a position of head of product management for their commodities and energy information systems. Stint in Switzerland for 4 years, managing IP for that section of the company and doing some innovation stuff. And then back home to Denmark and discover that music and audio is still my passion.
And I guess the question that I have there was this as soon as you kind of started getting away from work I'm going to use the word retiring, but I don't know if anyone actually truly retires. But was this like a retirement thing, or did it start picking up again as like your children got older and you started having more free time again? And you're like, I really want to kind of get into.
The interest was always there because I have two daughters who play music. The first daughter, she got a violin when she was 4 years old. She'd seen one. We my wife and I parked her at sort of a playgroup when we went shopping on the weekends. And there she was introduced to the violin and all sorts of other instruments. So she kept talking about this violin for weeks. We thought it would pass, but it didn't. So Grandma got her a violin from the smallest size you can get from Japan, the Suzuki violin. So that led to, she started at a music school in the UK as, I think she was late, just about turning 8 when she started there. So I got to hear a lot of music, a lot of acoustic music in different rooms and concert halls and so on. And I always felt that listening to the same on loudspeakers was not really satisfactory. It wasn't authentic. You could just tell. You know, you walk past the window and somebody plays the piano, open window on a summer day. You can tell. You don't even have to think about it, whether it's Mrs. Smith playing her piano or it's loudspeakers reproducing it. So I was just like captivated by how can that be? I mean, what's the difference between the sounds and the instruments and voices or dropping a key on the floor, whatever? We know that instantly. We don't even have to think about it. But why don't we get the same instant recognition when we listen to the same things on the loudspeakers? So that became an obsession when I sort of, like you say, I semi-retired after that. I still did consulting work with actually some of my old friends that I originally did face linear filters and whatnot with in something completely different, which was U.S. securities class action.
So the same friends that you were designing amplifiers or oscillators, whichever, however you want to look at it.
Basis.
So you're still connected with them, and you start kind of going on these ideas of audio much later on in life.
That's right, and I think what I embarked on when I got home, I couldn't have done back when. So in a way, it was in that sense, it was a great interruption because, you just have to learn so much when you small companies, several small companies, startups, then a big corporate, right? There's a lot of, functions and ways of thinking and researching and so on. That was just a benefit. So I thought, well, I want to try and see if I can crack this problem. What is actually going on here? Starting with psychoacoustics, I think that's crucially important to understand how good our hearing is and in which ways you cannot get away with fooling that apparatus that we have. It's not going to work, right? I mean, it's really, our hearing is amazingly good.
What time frame are we talking about? Like this year has been, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'll say the last year, 2024, seems to be when Treble Clef really made a splash and started getting introduced and all of that.
Yeah.
Was this something that you're talking about starting to investigate the year previous or the year previous to that? Like, is this 2 years? Is this longer? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the launch was officially in Copenhagen in June 2023.
Okay.
But, even February before that, I'd not really seen it as a commercial venture. And it started, so the whole passion research project that started probably 6 years before. I mean, obviously I didn't spend every day on it, but it was over a 6-year period with, every time we went shopping, I would look for bowls of different kinds. I wanted to, to come up with some ideas how to do it. So while we were shopping, I was finding bowls that I could use in the workshop to cut up and put speakers in. My wife was getting quite annoyed with that. And, strange measurement sounds in the house and that kind of thing. But it was just passion. It was just like, I want to crack this problem as good as I can. How close can you get to authentic, right? And now we even have on our website, a story that actually describes what we mean by authentic, because it's an easy thing to say, but what do you mean, right? And how close is it? So how close it is, I'll leave for others to judge. But so far, that's how close I've got. So yeah, it was six years. And then people said to me, it's kind of like a hobby that's gone a bit too far now, isn't it, Ole? And it sounds really good and it looks interesting. Haven't you thought about trying to sell the things? But, I think having daughters who play and the first one taking it quite far, I had a lot of respect for the art and what musicians do and how much effort they put in. So why would the world need another loudspeaker company, and why should it be for me? So I wasn't really there for that. So what I needed was kind of like confirmation from someone. Unlike myself, I don't play music. I wish I did, but I have had it in the house all the time. But what are the artistic intentions? How is it perceived by musicians who both compose and play and spend all their life on doing that? I can't access that. I can't know if what I'm hearing is what they intended. So it's kind of thinking, well, if I have to go to that step, I have to find someone who can kind of close that loop for me, right? And not a friend, someone impartial.
Objective.
Objective, right? I didn't look for someone who would just pat me on the shoulders and say, oh, that's fantastic what you've done. I wanted the real, what's going on here? What's wrong, right? I wanted to know what's wrong. What things are not like hanging together the way they should. So I joined a chess club. I think that was November 22, because I used to play chess and I hadn't done any of that. So I thought I'd go and join a chess club. And these people, some people there, they were into jazz, and they said, oh, we're going to go and see this film called Music for Black Pigeons. It's a documentary about jazz musicians, a couple from Denmark, quite a few from New York. People like Lee Konitz and Joe Lovana and Bill Frisell and a whole bunch of people. And when I went to see that documentary, there was a trio playing first and telling us a little bit about the film and the background and what we were going to see. And one of the guys, he played the piano there. He turned out to actually be, he plays many instruments, but his main instruments are drums and percussion. But I thought, well, he sounds like someone I can approach. And he was selling some CDs in the bar. So I just went up to him and said, hey, can I borrow your ears? And he was like looking at me, what do you mean by that? So long story short, he came home to visit me in CD speakers, and he brought a CD. I actually really didn't know anything about him. I didn't know who he was. Later turned out he's an absolute legend in Denmark and beyond in jazz, and has recorded and produced 200 records or something like that. Wow. So he brought this CD that I didn't know either, and he wanted to play. I think it's called Number 8, the tune, with now deceased Japanese jazz pianist called Masafumi Kikuchi. Masafumi Kikuchi, I now know, to the Japanese is like Miles Davis is for us, like right up there. And Christian Osgood, his name is, he played drums on this, and then I think it was Thomas Morgan on bass. Thomas Morgan and was also in this movie, this documentary I went to see. So anyway, so I didn't know all that. And this piece is 6.5 minutes long, the longest 6.5 minutes of my whole life, I think. Because I was always sitting there, like it felt like being, at an exam of some kind, right?
Yeah, you're waiting to get judged. You're waiting to see what the results are.
Like, quite nervous. So he just raised his head in the end and said, that sounds damn good. And I was like, ooh. But then we had a conversation and I said, well, you say it sounds damn good, but was there not anything wrong? And he was like thinking about it, because it turns out he's extremely good at expressing, this whole idea about the artistic intention and what he's hearing. And he's also good at writing about it. So that was actually very unlike this Music for Black Pigeon documentary, because most of the there's a very good interviewer, a Danish interviewer who's been a journalist he's probably in his 80s now, probably his last documentary. But he's known for waiting for people to think how to express themselves or helping them along. So he was very good at interviewing the musicians of what they're thinking. But Clayton could express it, right? So he said, well, he said, the only thing I heard is like the second octave of the piano. I mean, it's very hard attacks that Masaku Mikikuchi does on the piano. But he said that the second octave, that was a little bit more than I think it should be. And then I started, wow, but that's probably the power response around da-di-da-di-da, all this kind of thing.
You start going into the technical elements.
He didn't like, he says, I adopted that. He's like, but something I don't understand, he doesn't say, it's outside my frequency range. I don't understand that.
That's a good one. I like it.
So I said, okay, can you play it on the piano? Sure. And so he played it on the piano, and I measured, it's 400 to 600 hertz or something like that, right? And said, wait, give me a second. And I just changed the sort of power response, the room curve on the speakers, and we tried again. He said, that's it. Yeah, that it's amazing. I've never heard anything like it. And so I was happy.
With that, let's kind of segue into a quick break. And right after the break, I want to kind of get into how that kind of experience then led to the commercialization and building up the company.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We have Ole with us, and just before the break, we're kind of talking about how he was experimenting with making a speaker that represents or reproduces live music, piano, violin, all of that, and kind of getting insights from a local legend or an international legend about how to kind of tweak that sound. Now, Ole, the question that kind of popped up is, at this point, Treble Clef was not a commercial venture. It wasn't a company. Or had you started already thinking about this speaker kind of being taking it to market? Or was this still in that kind of early development stage?
I had been thinking about it because in my, the last bit of my career in Switzerland, as I mentioned, I managed IP. And I wasn't actually sure that any of what I'd done was patentable. I thought more maybe a design patent would be a smart idea. But I was used to writing invention disclosures. I was kind of like scouting for innovation and speaking to people in this big corporate who were doing innovations sometimes, right? That we should protect as a corporate. So it's kind of built into my DNA when this is some idea before it's disclosed, etc. You should at least check if you can have it patented. So I wrote an innovation disclosure, it's called. Yeah. I sent it to an IP lawyers in Copenhagen, and his reply coming back was, "This is definitely patentable. You should do that. Let's file a patent, and we should do it with the EPO first." So we actually got that patent, and I've never seen that. I mean, patents can take a long time to get a grant for. And I was nervous about that because it'll cost a lot of money if you start, having to go backwards and forwards with the patent agency and pay the lawyers and so on. But he said you should do it, and said, okay, let's go for that. And we actually got the patent in less than 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Literally pretty much flew straight through the EPO. And they advised to start with the EPO because they're recognized as the best searchers. Is there any prior art, as it's called? And there wasn't, and they're actually so well regarded for that. Like the USPTO, the US Patent Agency, will usually not do more than a cursory search if it's an EPO filing that you can send to the US a year after you first apply. So obviously I got that patent. So in a way, you could say I thought about it, but it wasn't the trigger to go commercial. I would just have done that anyway. So I met Kristen in February 23, and we had more backwards and forwards than just that one encounter. And I started inviting other people who, produced music or started microphone companies, or all sorts of people who were related. I also met some legends in Danish design who came home and looked at the speakers, and that it was interesting because I met so many people that you think, well, I have to look for audiophiles, but there are obviously audiophiles everywhere, right? So the people who are interested in design and all the rest of it, many of those turned out to be, audiophiles at some level, at least, maybe not as mad about it as me, but certainly as users of audiophile stuff.
And at this point, was the design fairly finalized? You mentioned you met someone in.
What Kristen Osgood came and saw and heard was a first prototype. So there's a whole story behind, doing that, just meeting a lot of people who are really good at what they're doing by coincidences and searching, and then they know someone else. So there was a small team already behind it. Some of them doing brand identity and so on, but still studying, but joined us. People that my younger daughter had met when she moved to Denmark. I found someone who turns out to be just amazing on CAD design and machining and small series manufacturing. He also has a Guinness Book of Records in plate spinning.
Oh, wow.
And he's a multiple champion in frisbee golf. So his big passion is to do frisbee discs. Doug and your colleagues, Chris and Jeremy, obviously saw the workshop with all this going on out there.
That's so cool.
So with these people, we built, got all the parts. So I still remember very vividly, the first time I could lay out all these parts that could build one of these speakers on the floor, from, electronics, where I found some really good people who have a background in pro audio in Germany. The very deep insights into DSPs and software. So I worked with them to get what I wanted from their software, but the way they did it was just what I wanted. So I had all these parts on the floor, and then finally assembled this. That was just such a moment, right? Taking it from ideas, working with all these now, friends of mine, collaborators. I mean, they run their own businesses, and in a way they're suppliers, but they're just as much friends. And, been on the journey through COVID and everything that we all experienced, right? I mean, we paid 5 times more than a piece of plexiglass, for example, normally costs. I mean, it's just crazy to build that first prototype during COVID. But, assembled it and it was there. Then one of the guys, actually the guy who came up with the circuit for this analog face linear, he lives in the States now, but suddenly there was a knock on the door. And was just about to lift up the first speaker, and it was him and his wife outside, thinking they would visit me. So that was like crazy, right? So they were seeing and hearing these speakers for the first time, just because they randomly came here. So that was the first one we built, right? So that was obviously before February 23, and then we launched in June at a design festival in Copenhagen. Because I thought, that it's a design item and an audio thing, and it's nice and amusing to see the few comments that you guys have on the YouTube video and Instagram short clips and so on.
Yeah. There's like a range of questions and thoughts that kind of come to mind with this, because it is a visually striking speaker. Like there's not very many speakers that look like it.
No.
And the first instinct of a lot of people, and this happens with some other companies as well, where you look at the speaker and the first thought is, okay, well, this is a piece of furniture.
That's never going to work, right? It's never going to sound good.
Exactly. And the idea that, in your site mentions this, my dad's an architect by trade, so I hear this time and time again, like form follows function. And I see this on your website. Yeah. There is influence from the furniture side of the world. And you even mentioned like your father being into furniture and kind of that tie-in as well.
Sure.
So how did you come up with blending that like aesthetic beauty with the function? Like at what point did you say, well, this looks like a treble clef?
Yeah.
Let's go down that route a little bit further.
That took a while because it is true form follow function. I mean, I started, as I mentioned, with psychoacoustics. I needed to know how our hearing works and all the masking and all the other things. So I obviously read Dr. Floyd Toole's book, Backwards and Forwards, several times. I found other literature and more recent research and so on to try and get a handle on what are we up against here to try and make something sound authentic and what bits are important. And obviously everything that Dr. Floyd Toole has done is important. So all that is in there. And, out of all that, thinking about it in research, it's quite clear that, one, it shouldn't be a box keeping half of the energy inside for the bass. And number two was there shouldn't be any baffle or any edges or sharp corners or anything like that. We should go for a very smooth dispersion at the higher frequencies, and we should go from something that is not omnidirectional, and one of the things, coming back to this phase linear filter, that even, Siegfried Linkwitz and Riley. I mean, of course, we built Linkwitz-Riley passive filters in the early days, and manufacturers still use them for passive filters. But you can't get them phase linear. And, he said also, don't worry about phase and time coherence. You can't hear that. And it's like just absolutely not true. But I don't think there's been many speakers, including those I built, that were truly phase linear. I did this electronic crossover, but obviously that was just a crossover. It doesn't take into account how the speakers behave themselves, and the fact that it's is some kind of a filter as well, just putting a speaker unit into a box. So you have a system at the end of the day that consists of a box and speaker units and amplifiers and cables and crossover and so on. All of that together has a transfer function, and that transfer function you have to make linear, both in frequency and response, to get the right thing. So if you go back like years, like back when everybody used reel-to-reel tapes, there were people thinking about what I was thinking about there too. And they found out that, if you have the attack on a piano or plucking the string on a guitar or the bow hitting the violin, anything with an attack, actually every sound starts with an attack. Dropping your keys on the floor is an attack that you recognize instantly. So it turns out if you cut the first fifth of a second off a reel-to-reel tape and then play it for people, you can't tell, was that a piano? Because after that, it settles into the fundamental and the harmonics. The whole cacophony of frequencies and everything that happens in the attack are gone if you cut off the first fifth of a second. We can't recognize what instrument it is when you do that. I mean, that's been known since the 50s or something, right? I still have the book on my table. So you can't ignore those things. And to say you can't hear it in the bass is like, well, how do you know? Have you ever had a loudspeaker that was pretty much phase linear down to like 20 hertz? No, there aren't any. So how can you say that, right? So So with a scientist kind of an engineering view on those things, it's just like, no, forget everything. Read everything again, fall in love with Dr. Floyd Toole's book. And then, well, he says as well, I mean, absolute phase, of course, we can't hear, but relative phase between different frequencies we can hear. So it was just all that, and then what are the physical implications for building a loudspeaker to take all that into account? So I guess having seen, sheet music and my girls playing and mom learning to read sheet music to help them and so on, I just was thinking, hang on a second, the treble, it just was a flash in my head. That shape, I mean, it's slender at the top. It has this hole in the middle that I can use for these bass cups on the side and create it. It's just like, how does the human brain work to come up with things like that? It's just like, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm going to try. So
you're just so immersed in this on the day-to-day life that as you're doing the research, it just kind of all blends together. And
it just suddenly blends together in a flash of an idea, right? And then obviously, as you then start working on it, things change a bit and you do this, that, and the other thing, and there are many details and bumps on the road. But I think it was just that flash. That's the way to avoid a baffle and box and everything. Just make it a treble clef, and it looks like a design thing as well. How cool can that be? So I just did it, made my first prototype like that.
So even from the first prototype, that kind of general shape was already considered. It was already there.
Yes, I have a handmade prototype where I bought a kitchen worktop in walnut, 40 millimeters thick, and realized how damn hard that is to cut.
That's massive.
And all these bowls that I mentioned, like I was looking for when we went shopping, right? So that is in my best friend's house, one of the guys that I did audio things with when we were studying, and later started a company with as well. So it's in his holiday house here in Denmark, the original prototypes. So they were built way before the TCA-M as you see today.
And so fast forward a little bit, that kind of gives a good sense of the kind of form and why it looks the way it looks, but also the function behind it. Now, the interesting thing is we do see a lot of speaker companies, right? Like there is a lot, and you've already mentioned it's like, why do you need another speaker company?
Yeah.
When Treble Clef launched, what I found fascinating and really unique is that you didn't launch at a CES, you didn't launch at a Munich, you didn't launch at a traditional hi-fi event.
No.
You went towards I'm going to say furniture, but it's more kind of design, and furniture is part of that at design events. And was there kind of a specific thinking behind that?
I mean, I guess a couple of things. I mean, one, because like we've touched on, I like design and sort of interested in it. I not thought of myself as a designer. I guess I've ended up like one, but it's like a background. You've just seen it and I like it. And I've been wondering, when you look at, magazines like Wallpaper or any of these design and House Beautiful and whatever, there's all these beautiful rooms, but in these featured photographs, you never see a loudspeaker.
Yeah.
I was thinking, why is that? Because my experience is that, half of the people I meet who might have a nice interior, they are also at some level music interested or even interested in hi-fi. So why don't we see speakers? And I guess there's a prioritization that, a nice interior doesn't feature a usually very big loudspeaker if it has, some kind of box shape, at least, right? A big loudspeaker to go deep in the bass. And I was just guessing, well, it probably doesn't fit in such a nice interior. So I just thought it would be an interesting way to launch at a design, because I knew people would come for the design. They probably like music as well. So it'd be an interesting combination to test out. So we did the same in New York during New York Design Festival. And of course, in terms of we want to address anyone who likes good audiophiles, interior design people, anyone who's into it, but it just felt like the right way of launching something that looks not so much like we recognize a conventional loudspeaker, and then take it from there, right? So now we have, like you said, it's been a couple of years now, and my girls said, "Don't be so frustrated. It's going slow, Dad. It's going fast." That people recognize it more as a speaker now, and we've held a lot of event with furniture companies. Actually, we have the speakers on display with Carl Hansen and Son in New York. I'm just actually traveling there again tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
For another event. So so that's super exciting, right? Because then we get all these conversations going like we have here. Why is it designed like that? And I never start talking. We just play some music first, and then people come with all the questions. So that's actually it has become the most enjoyable part of this venture. Apart from I'm still deeply involved in the science and the technology. I can speak for hours about it, but the experiences of seeing people reacting to the speakers, both how they look and then when they heard them, and having those conversations is, such a ball. I really like that.
My understanding is that the Treble Clef speakers, you could pretty much change all the materials, all the outward facing materials, the wood, the metal finishings, the aluminum, the color, the anodizing, and all of that stuff. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So we made this configurator, and my younger daughter is a 3D graphic artist. So she's done what you see in the configurator. And so we're just showing the possibilities really there. I mean, when people inquire if they have some interesting other wishes within the bounds of the fundamental design we have done, of course, that we can entertain and do. The physics of it will be the same, the sound will be the same, but the expression as a design item will actually be quite different. And obviously it will be a treble clef, but the different types of wood or colors or surface treatment, anodizing, the aluminum frame, etc. I think I saw you unpacking, maybe you heard them as well, but that was the brushed aluminum version with walnut, right? So that part of it, when we speak to people, gets round to a story. I mean, we get to know people, what they're interested in. Somebody's daughter is a ballerina, but they like music. And it's just fascinating, the kind of stories that gets, created and heard through engaging with it. And obviously, if people asked about the science behind it, I'll go into as deep as people can muster. But yeah, it's that whole experience of doing it and the design that actually is a functional item and is pretty new, both, and it's an acoustic patent, right? It's an acoustic principle that's patented.
Yeah.
In the bass in particular. So it is unconventional and it is new and different, but it is so, I feel, for good reason.
And I think there's a balance, right? Because I definitely resonate with the idea that the best speakers that are out there might not actually look the greatest and be accepted in the home. Some people call this the wife factor or the partner factor or whatever it may be. But the idea being that, like, try and convince your partner, like, yeah, we need these speakers in the home. Whereas these, they might actually say, like, this looks like a sculpture, this looks like a work of art. So it kind of gets accepted and kind of more willingness to bring it in. And the other little bit here that I just want to touch on, because I did unpack these things and they are quite heavy. I'll say that to start. And the experience of actually receiving them and unpacking them was really cool, because everything from the box to kind of the materials and how they were shipped and all of that was, I'm going to say, very well thought out and different than a lot of other speakers that I've experienced. It's not, one, it's not a cardboard crate or a cardboard box. It's this plywood that perfectly holds everything together and is strapped perfectly in line. They ship vertically, so they're not on their sides or on their back or anything like that. And even the wheels that come with it are designed to essentially allow you to quickly put it into place, and then they unbolt. How much like time and effort and energy went into those other pieces, that like other, I'm going to say, the experience of opening this and the experience of setting it up and all of that?
Well, a lot. I mean, I started with flight cases and sent them out to another review magazine in Europe. And the transport people, who shall remain unnamed, managed to completely smash up these flight cases that we had custom designed. And then I think, all the things that goes into making a company and a product like this commercial, I have the advantage of having been a product manager all my life and head of product management and, understand everything about support and commercials and everything like that. So I didn't start from scratch. I had a good idea how much that's involved, and stupidly I started again because it is a big job. But again, like with the people I found who are still with the whole project and making various parts, I found these clip lock people, which is the clips in this box that you could open so easily. And that actually all started with just sending them the CAD model of the speakers.
Oh.
And so that's how they work. They pack up everything from healthcare systems to military hardware and anything in between, right? By having a CAD model. And then they design it, and a sales manager came home with the box, and we put the speakers in it and did it together and discovered like 3 or 4 things we'd like to change. And then I think we changed 2 or 3 other things, and the whole process might have taken, a month and a half, 2 months after that first experience of sending speakers out. I was like, this is not going to work. This is not the right way of doing it. And so we did that. So now we can just, we can just order these boxes. They are custom made for us, like any of the boxes they do. That's their business. It's been around for like 30 or 40 years or something doing this. So it's when you do anything like that, for trading rooms and whatever, there's only one way to get sleep, and that's to fix all these problems. Otherwise, the phone will be ringing at 6 o'clock in the morning. You don't want that.
You're essentially avoiding any headaches down the road by just doing it right the first time.
We're trying. Obviously, we don't get everything right, like the first time with the shipping. And there's always ideas for what can be improved, and we do it. And I think the whole team is like-minded, right? From marketing to RSVPs and invites to boxes to anything. We just try to iron the kinks out because it makes happier customer and our lives so much easier if we do it that way.
What would you say has been the kind of greatest piece of feedback or the greatest experience that you've enjoyed since starting Treble Clef and having people listen to these and all of that? Is there a kind of like a moment that sticks out?
The one that will stick out for a long time that will be difficult to outdo, I think, is that through Jorden, who I met first and came to listen to the speakers, we knew we were going to launch in New York on this design festival in May last year. And we had an idea of recording something and in a studio. And then Jorden has always dreamt of playing with Joe Lovano.
Okay. And
he's met him before. I think they did some teaching thing or something together in Copenhagen many years ago, but they haven't played together. And Jorden reached out and eventually got hold of Joe, and Joe apparently knew about the speakers from our marketing. He's also a bit into hi-fi. So Jorden and Joe decided, let's play. We'll record something, and it was Joe who said, why not do it in the Rudy van Gelder studio? And I'm like, what? When Kristen called me, that's crazy. The Rudy Van Gelder studio, can we do that kind of thing? And he said, yeah. So we got Joe Lovano, Sam Yahel, and Kristen Osgood into the Rudy Van Gelder studio on a Sunday, the 19th of May, with Maureen Sickler, who now owns the Rudy Van Gelder studio and runs it with her husband, Don Sickler. So we spent 8.5 hours in there recording a whole session. And we've just finished mixing and mastering that in the Village recording in Denmark with Thomas Wang, who was, I think he's behind something like half of all Grammy-nominated jazz recordings is mixed in his studio. So he came here to listen to actually the prototypes that I still have here, the first ones that I built. And he called me the next day and asked me if I wanted to have them in his studio. So we actually have a TCA-M in a pretty epic studio in Copenhagen. And
that's so cool.
He's using them for mixing and his stuff. And I thought he would just do this recording, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of gets around Dr. Floyd's Tools circle of confusion, right? Because when you're mixing and mastering, you obviously don't know if it'll be a pair of headphones like the one I can see you're wearing.
Yeah.
Or an Apple thing or loudspeakers of any kind. And so you have a real challenge. How do you mix and master something that's going to sound on average pretty good for everyone? But since we had our own recording session in the Rudy Van Gelder studio, known for clear sound and everything, you go in there and you see like a Love Supreme, John Coltrane, you got Miles Davis. It's just legendary, and people don't get in there, right? It's not a museum, it's not an open house. It's just for recording. So if you have a recording thing to do, you go there. Otherwise, there's no open doors. So just being in there is incredible. And then, we recorded the musicians recorded and made up and improvised some very dynamic music with Joe on his gongs that he really likes, and obviously the saxophone. Sam Yahel on the famous pianos in the Rudy Van Gelder studio and on the organ, in the B3 organ. That, if you just think about who's been playing those pianos over the years, and the organ is just mind-blowing, right? So there we were on a Sunday recording, and then Maureen sent us a rough mix that she did on the day we recorded. So just feedback from Joe and Kristen and Sam on what they were hearing, a bit more drums here, a bit more sax there, and then we got that file. And I'd invited people to come to hear this, and Joe, Sam and Kristen presented it on the TCA-M. So that's definitely my top experience so far. That'll be difficult to outdo.
That is absolutely legendary.
Yeah.
And the kind of final question that we like to ask different people that come on the show is, and I'm going to tweak this a little bit for you, but if there is a day where you get to just enjoy your speakers, and it's not work related, you're not trying to do any testing or anything like that, what would you put on to listen to your speakers?
I'd probably put the mixed and mastered version from Thomas Wang of that Rudy Van Gelder recording on the speakers. That's quite something.
Is there anywhere that people can actually listen to that?
Yeah, so we when we go to events, we'll certainly play, maybe not all of it, but some of it, and introduce it. Treble Clef Audio owns that recording, and that's what we can do with it. So if you're lucky enough to buy a set of these speakers, you also get a master copy of that recording.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's a nice touch.
But other than that, I listen to so many things. I have a playlist called the TCA Eclectic playlist that has absolutely everything from electronic, classical, jazz, you name it. So I'd probably just put that on shuffle and listen to that.
That sounds fantastic. And maybe I'll kind of end with this. if somebody was looking to hear the TCA-Ms, where would they go to see kind of the upcoming events and different stuff like that?
So we posted on social media. So now we're starting. I think we'll continue that. We do, an event on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and we post it to Instagram. And we make it easy now to click through and send us an RSVP to join events. And we're trying to do that. So I'm flying over tomorrow. We have another event at the Carl Hansen flagship store in New York, 145 East 57th Street in New York. So that's the 30th of January. There will be more events, different places in New York. And I think soon we're working on having a representation in Canada. So there will probably be some news there. We're excited to be working with Cobus for actually the last event and this one, and I think hopefully in the future, where we have lots of cool ideas for events. So that's how we want to try. We want to pop up here, there, and everywhere, and just grow steadily, organically, find other, cities and places to do it as we get the sort of bandwidth to handle that, and focus very much on the music and the art, and talk nerdy technology and acoustics for anyone who wants it. But our focus will be on the music and the events and getting together and enjoy music.
I love it. Ole, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on to chat with us.
Thank you.
All the best.
Cheers.